Thomas Miller wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he surveyed his pasture at sunset. At 58, he had spent his entire life on this sheep farm nestled in the rolling hills of Montana. The land had been in his family for 3 generations, and the 200-acre farm with its flock of merino sheep was not just his livelihood, it was his heritage, his purpose. For 30 years, Miller Meadows had been known throughout the county for producing the finest wool. The farm sustained Thomas, his wife Eleanor, and had put their 2 children through college. But lately something was threatening everything he had worked for. "Another one gone," Thomas muttered, counting the flock for the 3rd time that evening. That made 5 sheep missing in just over a week. The financial loss was becoming unbearable. Each purebred merino represented nearly $1,000 in breeding value, not counting the wool they would produce over their lifetime. At this rate, he'd lose a quarter of his flock by month's end. His neighbor, Bill Jenkins, had stopped by earlier with an ominous warning. "Saw a wolf track by the creek yesterday, Tom. Big one too. Ranger says there's been a lone male spotted around these parts." Thomas had scoffed initially. Wolves typically hunted in packs and they rarely came this close to human settlements. But as he watched the worried expressions of his remaining sheep huddled close together in the evening light, a cold determination settled in his chest. Tonight he wouldn't be sleeping. The Winchester rifle that normally hung above his fireplace would be in his hands. Whatever was threatening his livelihood would not claim another sheep, not on his watch. The night air bit through Thomas's heavy jacket as he settled into the small hunting blind he'd positioned at the edge of the sheep pen. A thermos of black coffee sat beside him, his trusted Winchester across his lap. The quarter moon cast just enough silvery light across the pasture to make out the shapes of his sleeping flock. By midnight, a light drizzle had begun, pattering softly on the metal roof of the blind. The rhythmic sound nearly lulled Thomas to sleep several times, but each time his head drooped, he would jerk awake, fingers tightening around the rifle. It was just past 2 a.m. when he saw it. At first, just a shadow, darker than the surrounding night, moving with fluid grace along the tree line. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. The wolf was massive, larger than any he'd ever seen in photographs or nature documentaries. Its gray-black coat glistened with raindrops as it emerged fully into the moonlight. Thomas raised the rifle slowly, pressing the stock against his shoulder. Through the scope, he could make out the creature's powerful muscles, its alert ears and intelligent eyes scanning the perimeter. But something wasn't right. The wolf wasn't charging the sheep pen as expected. Instead, it circled cautiously, almost as if patrolling. It would advance a few yards, then retreat to the edge of the woods, looking back as if checking on something. Thomas's finger hovered over the trigger. One clean shot would end the threat to his livelihood. But curiosity stayed his hand as the wolf repeated its strange behavior, approaching, then retreating to the same spot in the woods. Just as Thomas was about to squeeze the trigger, a sound, faint but unmistakable, reached his ears from the direction of the forest. It couldn't be. It sounded almost like a child's whimper. The rifle lowered slowly as Thomas strained his ears against the night. There was again, a weak human cry. His heart hammered against his ribs as he set the Winchester aside and reached for his flashlight. "Hello?" he called out, stepping cautiously from the blind, beam of light sweeping toward the forest edge. The wolf growled, its posture stiffening, but it didn't flee or charge. Instead, it positioned itself between Thomas and whatever lay in the small hollow beyond the first line of trees. As Thomas approached, the wolf bared its teeth but held its ground. 20 feet away, Thomas stopped, directing his flashlight beam past the animal, and felt his world tilt on its axis. There, nestled in a crude den of leaves and branches, lay a small child no more than 5 years old. The boy was pale, dirt-smudged, and terribly thin, dressed in tattered pajamas emblazoned with cartoon dinosaurs. His eyes reflected the flashlight beam like a frightened animal's. "My God," Thomas whispered, immediately lowering himself to appear less threatening. Surrounding the child were the remnants of small game, rabbits and squirrels with clear teeth marks, and more astonishingly, the boy was partially covered with what Thomas recognized as one of his own missing sheep's wool, carefully pulled and placed like a blanket. The wolf hadn't been hunting his sheep, it had been selectively harvesting wool to keep the child warm. As Thomas inched closer, he saw the boy's ankle was badly swollen, explaining why he couldn't walk. From the state of his dehydration and gauntness, Thomas guessed he had been out here for days. Without the wolf's protection and provision, the child would surely have perished in the cold Montana nights. "It's okay," Thomas said softly, addressing both the trembling child and the vigilant wolf. "I'm going to help you both." The wolf's eyes, amber and intelligent, seemed to assess Thomas's intentions. After a tense moment, it took 2 steps back, still watching carefully but allowing the farmer closer to the injured child. In that moment, Thomas realized with staggering clarity how wrong he had been about the predator he'd been so ready to kill. With shaking hands, Thomas pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed 911, his eyes never leaving the wolf and child. "Emergency services, I found a missing child in the woods on my property," he explained urgently. "Male, maybe 5 years old, injured and hypothermic. And there's a wolf here that's been protecting him." The dispatcher's skepticism was audible, but Thomas insisted they send an ambulance and animal control immediately, providing his farm's coordinates. While waiting, Thomas slowly removed his thick flannel jacket. "Hey there, little fella," he called softly to the boy. "I'm going to help you get warm, okay?" The wolf growled low when Thomas took his first step forward, but didn't lunge. Thomas stopped, then tried a different approach. He set the jacket on the ground and slid it forward with a stick. The wolf sniffed it cautiously, then surprisingly took the edge in its teeth and dragged it toward the child. "Well, I'll be damned," Thomas whispered. He reached into his pocket for the beef jerky he'd brought for his night watch. Breaking off a piece, he tossed it halfway between himself and the wolf. The animal eyed it, then him, before quickly snatching the offering. Several pieces of jerky later, Thomas had gained enough trust to approach within a few feet. The boy, initially frightened, began to respond to Thomas's gentle voice. "And my name is Michael," the child whispered through cracked lips when Thomas asked. "I was camping with my daddy." 20 minutes later, flashing lights illuminated the forest edge as paramedics arrived, followed closely by sheriff's deputies and animal control. Their astonishment mirrored Thomas's when they witnessed the scene. A massive wolf sitting protectively beside an injured child, tolerating the farmer's presence nearby. "In 30 years of emergency response, I've never seen anything like this," the lead paramedic murmured as they carefully assessed Michael while the wolf watched warily from a distance Thomas had persuaded it to maintain. 3 days later, Thomas stood in the county hospital hallway, watching through a window as Michael reunited with his parents. The boy's father, James Parker, gripped his son tightly, tears streaming down his unshaven face. They had been camping in the national forest 10 miles away when Michael wandered off, sparking a massive search that somehow missed the area where the wolf had found him. "Mr. Miller," James said, approaching Thomas with outstretched hand. "I don't have words. If you hadn't found him." "I wasn't the one who found him," Thomas replied honestly. "That credit goes to the wolf." The local wildlife officer, Ranger Martinez, had made a surprising discovery during her investigation. The wolf was actually a wolf-dog hybrid, 80% gray wolf, 20% Siberian husky, likely abandoned by an owner unprepared for such an animal. DNA testing had also confirmed what Thomas suspected. The predator killing his sheep wasn't the wolf dog at all, but a mountain lion whose tracks were later found on the north side of his property. That evening, Thomas made a decision that surprised even himself. With proper permits arranged by Ranger Martinez, he adopted the wolf dog, naming him Guardian. The community that had initially gathered in fear when news spread of a wolf in the area now marveled at the story. Local schoolchildren began visiting Miller Meadows to see the heroic wolf dog who now patrolled the perimeter of the sheep pens with purpose, keeping predators at bay better than any conventional guard dog ever had. "Sometimes the things we fear most turn out to be our greatest blessings," Thomas told a reporter from the local paper who came to photograph Guardian with the sheep. "I nearly killed the creature that saved that boy's life, and ultimately saved my flock too." As if understanding, Guardian raised his head from where he lay at Thomas's feet, amber eyes reflecting wisdom beyond human comprehension. The sheep, once terrified of the wolf dog's scent, now grazed peacefully under his watchful protection. A living reminder that heroes often come in the forms we least expect.